This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I mean, I think we have Spurs there. We're really playing on all cylinders, putting the pressure on them. We get the lead there, and then we take our foot off the gas and allow them to, pretty much hem us in an entire period there. And it's tough to rebuild there, respond like that. But we've got urgency when we're down. We need to have that urgency when we're up in games too, and just continue to get closer to playing 60-minute games.
I love the cliche.
Yes, you love hearing about the 60-minute game.
I think I finally came out and said it on the post-game show because Chief mentioned it, or maybe it was during the intermissions. I was like, look, you're going to hear a lot of that talk, the 60-minute game. It's just not true. It doesn't happen, and we need to stop with that conversation. We understand what people were trying to say, a more complete game.
And the dips can't be as low, and the dips can't last as long.
100%.
Yeah.
And we'll get into what happened on Friday and Saturday, both losses for Tampa Bay. And I know a lot of our audience has some questions, some concerns about what's happening. No Kucherov during both of those games, out with an illness. And, once again, I think a lot of people had reference partner, inopportune time to have a turnover where the other team was able to capitalize on things, or just the lack of offense through a decent amount of these games. Columbus, it was through 2 periods, 9 shots on goal. The third period was a lot better, and you acknowledge that, and it's a big reason why you saw a pushback. But we're not used to seeing 11 shots through 2 periods against the Red Wings, or 9 through 2 periods against Columbus, and then a furious comeback in the third, generating offense. But we've seen that more times than not a little bit to start this year, and I don't know what to make of it other than just not in sync, not taking what the defense gives them. Yes, you can apply that saying in hockey. Sometimes you just get a shot on net to feel pretty good. You also have to have the puck to be able to generate some of those opportunities. And, maybe that's part of the issue. But no doubt those are a couple of things that I'm taking away the last couple of games, partner, where the Lightning just didn't generate enough offense to really make the other team totally uncomfortable for longer portions or stretches of the game. And, you let some points potentially slip away in games that were very winnable, or at least, getting into overtime, talking about the Saturday game.
Yeah, you're right. There are some troubling signs early this year. So a lot of times when I'm starting off talking about kind of the overarching view, or maybe looking back at a series of games, and it's a mixed bag, I start with the glass half empty and finish with the glass half full, because maybe I'm emphasizing more the glass being half full. I'm actually going to do the opposite today. I'm going to start with some facts that are actually not too bad for the Lightning, but then get to the things that I'm getting to them second, because I think they're troubling me a little bit more. So the trip finished with them getting 4 out of 8 points. Now, people might say that's glass half empty. Look, they could have finished with lower than 4. It's disappointing because they started with 2, right?
Yeah.
But, Coop talks about bringing home more points than games. They came close. 4 out of 8 on the road is medium, right? I mean, it could have been better, but it could have been worse. So they did bring home 4 points. The part of the game that I've been harping on a lot, team defense, while I wasn't crazy about some of the chances they gave up, certainly in the Columbus game and at points in the Detroit game, their GA number has come down from the first couple of games. They did a very good job, I thought, defensively in the Washington game, and they did a not as good of a job, but an okay job after a tough stretch in the first period against Detroit. They held Detroit to 1 goal, and even the Columbus game, they held the other team to 3, which is still more than we would have liked. If they had held them to 2, they would have gotten a point out of that game. But that is moving in the right direction. And so that is, we can say, a positive. The division can't get out of its own way. So Detroit is 5-1. I don't know if people around the league are going to feel that's sustainable, but the 2 teams that started 3-0, Florida and Boston, have lost 4 straight in regulation. Yeah. They're 3-4. Nobody is running away with this thing. So while the Lightning's record looks ugly, 1-3-2, the fact that they have 4 points, and yes, they're at the bottom, but they're tied with a bunch of other teams with 4 points for now. They don't play till Thursday, so some of these other teams may move ahead of them. Like, it's not like they've come out of the gates and they're looking up at like 3 teams that are 6 to 8 points ahead of them, right? So, I mean, it's early and they haven't fallen too far back, even though they only have 1 win through their first 6 games. The thing I'll mention is that this was not an easy trip. 2 sets of back-to-backs. The Lightning decided to come home in between the 2 sets because they had the 2 days. People might say, well, why didn't they just stay on the road? You know, we got home pretty early in the morning after the Washington game. We flew right back out to Detroit on Thursday. You know, there was a lot of more time spent on an airplane had they just gone straight to Detroit after the Washington game, but they were home, and there is some benefit to that, I think. Just the reality is that they played 4 games in 6 nights, all on the road, 2 sets of back-to-backs. The second game against both opponents, the opponent was rested and hadn't played. And we know Kucherov was sick and missed the game Friday and Saturday, sick enough that he couldn't play. And we know what it's like in a locker room when one player gets sick. There very well may be some other Lightning players that played, but maybe were not at 100%. So the other fact, and this just is a fact, they really emptied the tank the third period of that Detroit game, and that may have affected them on Saturday. So fans may be like, he's just coming up with excuses. Look, I'm just stating facts, and you can make of them what you will. People might say, well, every team has back-to-backs. Yes, they need to be better in the second half of back-to-backs than they were last year. I thought they played well in Washington. They didn't play as well in Columbus, but yes, you do need to be well in the second half of back-to-backs to have success over the course of a long regular season, but you are at a disadvantage. And Columbus played with a little burr in its saddle because the Blue Jackets had gotten whooped 2 nights earlier. I thought they played well, particularly once they got the 3-2 lead, and they really battened the hatches. We can get into the Saturday game in a second. So if you're coming out of this weekend and you're like, the Lightning just... I'm not feeling good about the Lightning. Keep in mind, like, this was a tough stretch. They got 4 points. They're within range, within the division. Kucherov is going to get over his illness. He's going to be hopefully back in the lineup as soon as Thursday. And the Lightning get, they had yesterday off and today off. So they're going to get some time here to rest and recuperate. And the schedule, at least home road schedule, is favorable for the rest of the month. They got 4 of the next 5, I should say, at home, and the one back-to-back, they're playing both games at home, and the team they see on Sunday, Vegas, will have played the night before. So that'll be a push. So that's my glass kind of sort of half full. The glass half empty part, while I will agree that the Lightning have looked good defensively in some games more recently played, they were not good defensively in the first 2 games. We are seeing some very troubling signs, Greg, of long stretches with no activity that is making the other team uncomfortable.
Yep.
And you kind of referenced it at the top of the show, and we might say, like, why is that? Well, some of it is the Lightning are not executing well enough to move up the ice. So either they're not getting into the offensive zone, or when they get into the offensive zone, it's a one and done, and the puck is coming right back out. And this just wasn't in the Columbus game where they went almost a whole period without a shot on net. They finished with 3 shots in the second period of the Columbus game, and one of those was a kind of generous shot from the red line that they gave to Darren Radish because he shot it in on the goalie. I mean, it's a shot. If the goalie doesn't stop the puck, it's in the net, so he needs to stop the puck. But, I mean, it was a dump in from the red line. That was one of their shots. So if this were a one-off, and we'd say, hey, they were coming in from Detroit, rested opponent, Kucherov was sick, maybe some other guys are under the weather, tough week, we would say, okay. But we've seen this in other games. We saw it in the 2 home games at the start of the year, long stretches where the Lightning weren't getting a shot on net, and often not even generating shot attempts, to the point that John Cooper talked about that before the Detroit game. He's like, we need more shots. We need more shot attempts. And even still, in the Detroit game and especially in the Columbus game, we had another sequence in a game where the Lightning just they're not making the other team uncomfortable at all.
No.
Basically. So some of it is they aren't executing to get up the ice. Some of it is they're getting stuck in their own zone. But some of it, too, is when they have the puck in the offensive zone, they are not really being able to direct pucks to the net. Now, the one period where they did it, and to me there was a difference between the third period on Friday and the third period on Saturday, which I'll get to, even though they had high shot totals in both and high shot attempt totals in both. The one period where they did it was the Friday game in Detroit. They got a lot of pucks in the net. They scored one. They only scored one because John Gibson was fantastic. I mean, they maybe had more scoring chances in the third period of that Detroit game than they had in like pick 2 games total.
Yeah.
That they've played this year. So that was the Lightning, we say, looking like the Lightning. To your point, it's hard to generate 19 shots on goal every period. They had 37 shot attempts. The Wings had only 11. They dominated that period. They were down. They pressed. But we haven't seen anything even close to that in too many other periods. And the contrast I will draw between the Friday night third period and the Saturday night third period, I have the Saturday night stats here. So let me pull them out. So again, 19 shots on net, 37 attempts on Friday. On Saturday, unofficially, 15 shots on net, and I think they ended up giving the Lightning 33 shot attempts. They changed it a few times. So still high, a little bit lower than Friday. Way fewer scoring chances. They had a couple, Gensel in particular, but they had a hard time getting to the inside. I think some of that is Columbus defended well once the Jackets went up 3-2. Some of it, again, the Lightning might have been running on E a little bit. So their volume was better in the third period on Saturday, but the key to that third period was they gave up the goal early in the period to Marchenko, and Coop talked about a tracking mistake. So Johansson bailed them out a number of times on Saturday. He couldn't do it on that particular save, and then they were chasing, and that's not where you want to be when you're the more tired team on the road against an opponent that was really committed to defending. So I've seen enough at this point that I would say this is an area of concern. Now, they showed on Friday in the third period that, they can turn it on. But I think some of that was Detroit was flat. The Lightning were flat. Detroit was flat. Detroit got flat after they had a good stretch in the first period. So, look, there are two teams on the ice. I don't think Detroit handled what the Lightning threw at them very well. That's part of it. The Lightning can't control that. Columbus handled it better. But I think for the Lightning, and this is maybe to the 60-minute game notion, like going through stretches where you have like 15 minutes with very little ozone time, no shots on net, and maybe like 2 attempts, it's going to make the game way more routine for the other side.
Sure.
And it's going to force this defensive part of the game to be even more important. Because if you're having a hard time generating, you can't be guaranteed that you're going to score even 2 to 3 goals. It means you need to hold the other team to maybe 1 or less. That's very, very difficult to do. So we'll see if a more steady diet of home games will help. Getting healthy in terms of the illness will help. Great to see that Gergensons was skating on the trip. Maybe he'll be able to come back sooner rather than later. Crozier as well. But that's kind of my glass half empty. Like, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing 5-on-5 flow of play through 6 games, with some isolated exceptions where the Lightning have been able to dictate play. But there's been too much hockey where it's either been nothing happening or the other team is kind of dictating the terms of action on the Lightning.
And considering the Lightning's pedigree, we don't anticipate that happening, or we didn't. That the flow of game would be somewhat even throughout these games, not so lopsided.
And
with
it has
the
been,
personnel.
like, I thought the Washington game was fairly even. I mean, I'm not saying that they've been dominated. I'm just saying, like, they have not done enough to make the other team uncomfortable.
I would agree with that. And, look, I didn't love the back check on Columbus's last goal.
Yeah.
The game winner. By the way, and that was Marchenko. I thought Johansson was outstanding. But, there needs to be a harder back check on that. And, Hagel missed the puck. He kind of did a follow through there, and you have Gonzalez, who was in position, but didn't do what he needed to do to tie some things up. Look, I think it's fair when you struggle like this, particularly controlling the puck and wondering what's happening offensively, generating some scoring opportunities. Okay, now this is where you as a staff partner are going to start to look at things a little closer and say, I'm going to take everything into consideration, and is there anything else I need to do from an organization perspective to see if we can try to get things going in a more favorable way? And I think, look, there are a few guys who I think right now who aren't named Cirelli, Hagel, Kucherov, Gensel, that Braden Point, you can have some honest conversations right now about where is their game and do you need to start moving some things around.
But Greg, I will say this. I think the three most consistent forwards the Lightning have had, at least since they went on the road, the 4-game road trip, let's kind of put those first 2 home games in a separate bucket. Going on the road, you can make an argument. The 3 most effective forwards on the Lightning were Gord, Bjorkstrand, and Holmstrom. They played together for much of the time as a line. They were a very effective line. Did they have their struggles when the Lightning struggled? Sure. But they had less struggles. They were, for the most part, a plus line. I know they were out on the ice for the McDonough goal against Columbus. I'm actually looking up their final numbers here because the Lightning scored a power play goal. So even strength goals were 3-1 Columbus. Yanni Gord, +1. Pontus Holmberg, +1. Oliver Bjorkstrand, +1. In the game where you lose 3-2 and one of your goals is a power play goal. So they were on the ice for the 1 even strength goal, and they were on the ice for no goals against. And we kind of have seen that from them. So those are not the players you mentioned. No. I will also mention, I think Gensel has been...
He's been good.
He has been impactful.
Yes.
I mean, he's gotten some points. He's got 1 goal. But, I mean, he's chipped in assists. And, if Hedman gets a stick on that puck in overtime, like Gensel gets an assist on the game-winning goal, Lightning were that close to getting the second point of that game. So I would say Gensel has been impactful and playing in a way that you're like, he is trying to make a difference, and in some instances he is making a difference. But too many of the other players are just not positively impacting the flow of play for the Lightning.
No, and look, you're not going to sit stars because you lean on them, and eventually those guys are going to figure it out. They just do. There's a track record there of that happening. Now, the guys you mentioned, I think they have done well understanding the expectations. I think there are a few who there's some interesting conversations to be had about, is a guy down in Syracuse playing better? Do you bring him up to see if it can jumpstart some stuff? And maybe a guy sits for a few games. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. Because we talk about this competition. Well, what good is that competition if you don't use it?
Yeah.
And whether it's 5-6 games into the regular season or midway through the season, I'm not sure it matters. I mean, you could internally in your head say, look, we're going to give this group 20 games, and if we're still struggling to find that consistency, or whatever you want to call it, then do we start dipping into our toolbox, which would be down in Syracuse? I'm simply saying it's caught my attention enough where I'd look at a couple of guys and say, I don't know how long I'd stick with this, keeping them in the lineup without showing some production. And if you're going to keep it a few more games, then you better have a short list of some guys I think you would call up to see if you could maybe see what they have.
Well,
that's kind of where
I do think that you let the month play out because now the schedule flips. The Lightning squandered their first 2 home games. It would have been nice if they gotten points out of even one of those games. They didn't. But, they got teams traveling to them now. Chicago starts a road trip on Thursday. So the Hawks will have had a couple of days off. They had an overtime win last night at home. I think they're 3-2. So good for Jeff Blashill that they've gotten off to an okay start. But, Anaheim is traveling across the country, and the Ducks will have already started their road trip, and they're catching Vegas, traveling across the country, playing the second half of a back-to-back like the Lightning. So let's see how they do this weekend when they aren't the road team and they will be at home and not necessarily traveling on an airplane to play a back-to-back, and see if that levels things a little bit. But, the fact remains that I can tell you the stats, they're pretty ugly right now in these categories that we were just kind of referencing. So if we look at face-offs, Lightning actually improved a little bit from the Boston game in terms of their team face-off percentage, but they were tied for last, 42.1%. That is far too low. Shots for per game. Tampa Bay, 30th out of 32 teams. 23.3 shots per game. And then we look at shots against per game. And again, shots against per game, they may not all be scoring chances, but it tells you that the other team is having more success getting shots through to the opposing goaltender. The Lightning are 29th out of 32 teams in shots allowed per game. In other words, if you're first, you're allowing the fewest. So, there are only, 4 teams that have allowed more shots on average per game than the Lightning, and there are only a couple that have managed to shoot more pucks on net on average than the Lightning. You throw in the face-off problems where you're not starting with the puck a lot, and it kind of leads to just putting a lot of pressure on your defense, team defense, and your goaltender.
Yeah, right.
Because the other team has the puck a lot. Now, the Detroit game, Detroit had a good stretch for about 7 to 8 minutes in the first period when they grabbed the lead and they put some pressure on. I thought the rest of the first 2 periods was kind of a nothing burger. So I understand the Wings are 5-1. They did not have a particularly inspired performance. They didn't. The Lightning didn't either. The Lightning didn't generate much in the first 2 periods, but when the Lightning turned it up, Detroit had no answer. Detroit got points out of that game because Gibson bailed them out in the third period. So, every opponent may be in a slightly different boat, right? Like Columbus played a much more spirited, kind of engaged game, and we saw that in how it played out and the disparity in the shot attempts. The Lightning closed in the third period, but through 2 periods, the shot attempts were 51-28 Columbus. So that makes it tough. It makes it tough to kind of impose your will on the other team when you're not really doing much with the puck. You either don't have it, or when you have it, you're having trouble being in sync. You're not connecting the dots, as we talk about. You're not making the other team work hard in the defensive zone. So those are all things that I think are going to need to change. And if it's a personnel component, which you mentioned, then maybe you have to look at that. I still think it's a little early because circumstances of the road trip may have played a role here. So let's see how the Lightning look, I would say, in the next 3 games this week, all at home, and see if they look a little bit more in sync.
I think that's fair, because you don't want to take that approach where you have the quick trigger. That being said, first time in a few years, the Lightning have maybe had options internally to make a move. I've been disappointed, I think, from a few players who we thought were going to build off of last year and haven't really done that. And the last thing you want to do is just kind of take up space when you have other guys who might be pushing you that could generate some offense. Because right now, this is about, to me, generating momentum. Forget about winning games. Obviously, you want to do that. I think if you create momentum consistently throughout the game, you give yourself a better chance of winning. There are too many bigger gaps in the games where maybe something's happening and then there's nothing happening. And that, for a team who has the pedigree of the Tampa Bay Lightning over the last few years, I know they've been knocked out of the playoffs in the first round the last couple. Still, that's something that you don't anticipate happening as much. And again, you could just chalk it up early in the year, guys trying to figure stuff out. Okay, fine. Mm-hmm. But at what point, if you have legitimate options, do you stand pat? And I think those are some questions internally that John Cooper and his staff are talking about. I want to get to some questions, partner. Let me get to
let me just get this one point in, Greg, because people might have been wondering, why did the Lightning recall Scott Sabourin? So since we last had a show, we were talking about Phoenix Copley, right? The Lightning traded him back to LA for future considerations. So the Lightning had an open roster spot there, and then they put Max Crozier on IR, which simply means that the player has to sit out a week. He got injured Tuesday. The Lightning, after the weekend, we're not going to be playing until Thursday. So Crozier could come off IR and be in the lineup as soon as Thursday. We'll see if that's going to transpire. but you're basically taking two guys off the roster. So the Lightning called up Steven Santini, which we talked about on the Friday show. He did not get into either game, but he was insurance. And they called up Sabourin. So fans might be like, well, why did they call up Sabourin? First of all, he didn't get into either game. He couldn't because he had a 4-game suspension. I think that this is the Lightning. First of all, they're doing a solid for Sabourin. He did have to miss the 2 Syracuse games over the weekend, but if the Lightning should need Scott Sabourin down the road, he's burned 2 games of his suspension. I think that it's possible we're going to see a similar situation happen if the Lightning have an open roster spot where they can basically call him up and have him burn more games of his suspension, because you actually need him.
Good point.
If you feel you need him down the road, you want to be able to call him up and play him. So I think that is kind of sort of
you mean the Florida Panthers.
Yes. I mean, they have Douglas, who has acquitted himself very well. He fought a tough guy in Olivier on Saturday. But I think that people might be wondering, like, why did they do that? I think that's why. And both of them are back in Syracuse now. So hopefully Crozier is able to return. And if he is, the Lightning do still have 1 open roster spot. So to your point, maybe they do call somebody up. We'll have to wait and see from the minors. A couple of guys I want to mention as in addition to the Gord line that I've noticed in one category is very obvious. Very obvious. The goaltending has been excellent. I know Vasi took some flack maybe for a goal or 2 in the first 2 games. I think he's been terrific. I think if you're a Lightning fan, you should feel great about how he's looked in the net. I think he's looked very, very good. Johansson has been fantastic as well. So the goaltending the Lightning have gotten, it has been high-quality goaltending, which is very important, particularly in some of the games where they've gotten points out of them because they needed some saves late. In the 2 games that they got to overtime and lost, they needed saves late to preserve the tie. And the other thing I'm going to mention, I think J.J. Moser has been the Lightning's best defenseman so far this year.
Could you say best player? Gensel, maybe. Well, I think you're right collectively, but I mean
it is reflected. He was leading the Lightning, so he was suspended for the first 2 games.
Right.
In the Boston game and the Washington game, he led the Lightning in ice time more than any other defenseman. I actually didn't look after the 2 games over the weekend, so let's see where he finished. Moser was not leading the team in ice time in Detroit, 21-21. That was Hedman, actually, had 26-12. But Moser scored the goal, as we know, in Detroit, and he was at 21-23. So his minutes went down a little bit over the weekend, but the quality of his play has been noticeably high. I think when J.J. Moser, as well as the other J.J., but when J.J. Moser has been on the ice, the Lightning have had fewer problems with things that they want to try and do. That's maybe a really general way of putting it and not like razor sharp analysis. But that's what I'm seeing. Like, I get the feeling when Moser is out on the ice and the puck comes to him, the Lightning are executing out of the defensive zone. When Moser gets the puck in the offensive zone, something good might happen. I think that's a compliment to how well he has played.
I think so, and he's been physical. Not just being physical, and I get that. He's doing other things, partner, that go into being a defenseman and being an effective one. But I think you're right when we take a look at his game. That has stood out. The chippiness, the edginess that he's playing with has certainly been noticeable, and I can appreciate that. By the way, tonight, enjoy some Reef Rum. Smooth, versatile, and now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Reef Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reef Rum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. So make sure you do that. Don't advise you to drink after the games, after the Lightning had a couple of losses. That wouldn't be good. But we understand when you're at the game and you want to feel good and relaxed. Yeah, sometimes that's okay. I agree with you on Moser. I think that's been very, very encouraging. And I will say this, and this is more, what do they call it? Memory bias. I do feel like recently some of the opportunities the other team has made that has allowed them to score, it's been, I don't want to say a fluky play, but almost a player beating another player. An individual making a play on another individual. And we talk about margin of error being smaller in today's parity-driven game. Sometimes that does happen. Whether it's Chernak missing on a clear in front of his nets, whether it's Gonsalves coming back. And, it's there in front of him. And
even the Severson goal, I thought that was a 2-on-2 with Severson jumping in the play. It was actually a 2-on-3. So McDonough and Chernak have had a tough start to the year. They have. They've taken some hits on goals against when they've been out there. They were out for all 3 goals.
Right.
Wasn't necessarily all their fault. Like the Marchenko goal, it was more the tracking and the back check. And the Severson goal, the 2 defensemen were back, but it was Cirelli, who's arguably maybe your best defensive forward along with Hagel. You could make that argument, and I'd have to watch the replay again. But, Severson's open in the middle of the ice. He's the third guy. Cirelli kind of goes to, I think, where the puck carrier was, where McDonough was in that neighborhood. So a 2-on-3 turned into a chance for the defenseman trailing the play. So mistakes, right? Mistakes are being made.
Yeah.
Now, some of it was, Chernak got handcuffed by the puck, and Johnson made a good play there. Like, he grabbed it, and he had a nifty little finish.
And you mentioned him. That guy is on the puck.
Yeah, he is.
He is everywhere. So you get that. And then I look back in the Detroit game, moments before Larkin scores, Hedman has almost a tap in. Is that fair to say?
It's hard to know if somebody disrupted his stick. Maybe the goalie Gibson did something. It's hard to know. I didn't see a replay of how the puck skipped past his stick, but that play led to the Larkin breakaway.
And that environment, and let's say it did get deflected and it was a tough play for Heddy, 6 out of 10 times, maybe the Lightning score on that. Hagel makes the play, Hedman doing what he does. You take a calculated risk doing that. Because if you miss, it's coming back the other way, and there's a chance the other team's going to have a breakaway.
Very similar to the Gensel-Cirelli play that we saw at the beginning of the Boston game. That's basically the same play where Cirelli had the tap-in right at the beginning of the Boston game. And I know that we play this highlight at the beginning of the third period, the bumper music, so I hear it every game. But last year, the Lightning won an overtime game against Nashville where Gensel fed Paul at the side of the net. So Gensel has made that pass before that's led to goals. That time it didn't work.
Yeah, so that also is just kind of sticking out. There's been some plays, and it's been individual plays, that they're just not winning right now. And I think that's culminating in what we're seeing. Does that mean the world is ending? No, it's not. It's just these are things they're pointing out through 6 games that I think eventually they get righted. But until they do, does John Cooper have some options outside of switching the lines up and the D pair up and go from there? Because I agree with you about the goaltending. I think it's actually been very good. Tampa Bay. Let's get to some questions, partner, at Bolts Radio. Small sample size, but the only positive I can take out of this so far is probably the penalty kill. Well, I think the goaltending is part of that. If you want to go that route, partner, that's probably the thing that would stand out for me. And then I think you're right on the individual side. I do think J.J. Moser has looked very solid, which has been great to see. Now he's got to have his teammates on the back end get back to that. I thought Crozier was playing pretty well before the injury, for sure. But I think, look, it's fair to say everybody else they've had more downs than ups. And that's kind of where we are. Lucas, I have a crazy idea. I'm hoping the team implements. I studied the data, and I found that if they get more shots on net, more chances for the pucks to go in the net. That is very true. That's probably the smartest thing we're going to hear today. What do you think, partner?
Yes. And we have pointed out that they are lacking in that category. They're near the bottom of the league in shots on goal per game. Having said that, sometimes, you are trying to get a puck to the net and you can't because the other team is defending, and therefore an extra pass is needed. I think it has been part of the Lightning's DNA, though, sometimes to the level of where it frustrates John Cooper, and he says we're trying to pass the puck into the net, that they lean too much into that.
Yeah.
What we saw over the weekend, particularly early in both those games, Detroit and Columbus, when the other team entered the offensive zone, there was a puck to the net almost right off the bat. And that's how the Lightning were down. And I think it was 9-0 in Detroit in the first period. And it may not have been quite that lopsided against Columbus, but the Jackets, I think the Lightning had an early shot, but the Jackets put some pressure on like right after Johnson scored, and they had a whole bunch of shot attempts and on net, like their attempts were getting on net. So the Lightning might benefit from having a little dose of that.
I would agree. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in that conversation, you can. Let's see here. Tampa Bay back again said there was a stat that showed Tampa having one 5-on-5 goal by a forward in the last few games.
Yeah, I think Ed Encina had that.
Stats.
That was the Gensel goal against Washington.
Yeah. I mean,
well, look, they haven't scored a lot of goals.
No.
So, they got a goal from McDonough. He's got 2 goals this year. That's good. And they scored in the power play without Kucherov. So, I mean, you can spin it a variety of ways. I think, and that was in the Columbus game. They got a goal from Moser in the Detroit game. But they could have scored. So here's the thing I will say. Like, yes, the stats are the stats. Jake Gensel could have had 4 goals in the third period against Detroit. Now, he didn't. So the stats tell us that they haven't scored a lot, 5-on-5. And they haven't gotten a goal from a forward since Gensel himself scored in the first period against Washington. But, they could have in that one period. Overall, though, whether it's forwards or defensemen, the Lightning are not driving play enough and consistently enough 5-on-5, which was a strength of their game last year. They were one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the NHL.
What's the one metric that I always laugh about? The heat zone. There is something.
Yes. So this thing has popped up. I have to say this thing, people probably know what I'm talking about. There's something called a game tracker that pops up, and I don't know how I'm seeing it, but I am following. And it's not just the Lightning. They do it for every game. So they have each individual player listed, and kind of they're ranking the player based on, I think it's all expected goals for and against. I don't know the methodology. The fans who are in on this probably can tell us. And when I see it, I'm like, yeah, I know that this guy had a good game, and that's reflected here because you can see like it's a bar graph, right? So if it heads right for offense and defense, they have a different color for each. That's good. If it heads left, that's bad, right? It means the other team is getting more looks.
Sure.
And it's like I say about any advanced analytic stat in hockey. And this is my opinion. This isn't like the gospel truth. I'm just giving you my opinion on it.
The gospel according to Dave.
Yeah, well, it's my gospel. Anyway, it is true that in all of these advanced stats, there is often an element of truth. There is an element of truth to it. But it is not a photograph. So if a player is on the wrong side of this bar graph, if that's the right way of putting it, because the stats tell us, however they are analyzing what is happening, that they were on the ice more when non-good things happened than when good things happened. They may have had an impact on the non-good thing, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't. There are 5 players on the ice. So sometimes you're just like pushed out with the tide or pulled in with the tide. So it's like we always say, you have to watch the game. And this is another one of like the heat zone, right? It's kind of like, all right, you got a shot attempt from the middle of the ice, but there was a defending player standing right in front of you and you blasted it into his leg. Should you have taken that shot, or would you have been better off passing it to the side where the guy maybe had an open net?
Yeah.
So again, you have to look at what is actually happening in real time to help you understand what you are seeing in some of these stats at the end of the game. But again, I feel like I'm the old man in my rocking chair.
No, I'm with you.
Yelling in the wind.
No, Shawnee. Chris says Lilleberg with another minor penalty, bringing him up to 5 in 6 games. He led the team in minors last year and continues to take bad penalties. He has to clean it up or needs to spend some time in the press box.
So Lilleberg did take
that's
a
not a good
high-sticking
thing.
minor. Yeah, it's not good to take minor penalties. Some penalties are better than others. The one he took in Columbus was avoidable. He tried to erase the guy just inside the blue line. His stick came up, clipped him. They're going to call you for a penalty there.
There is a balance because we made the argument, and I'm not sure it needed to be made all that much, is that you have some young defensemen who you want to grow and you want to build. And some of this are growing pains. So you don't want to be too emotional or irrational in your decision-making if a guy is taking some penalties and then you sit him for an extended period of time. Or maybe it's just for a game. John Cooper, maybe his greatest quality as a coach is being able to handle those situations very well and knowing when to sit a guy, when not to sit a guy, when to play a guy, when not to. I do think when you have some youth, let's be fair, there is going to be some growing pains with that.
Mm-hmm.
And do we want to see those minor penalties go away? We do. But I think Lilleberg, the only way he's going to learn, the best way, I think, is to play. And you hope those mistakes are minimized more and more every time he gets out there. That being said, I completely understand you are in the business to win games. And if you feel like those penalties are costing you and you can't trust him, then you're going to make that decision. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think this is part of the process with any young player, particularly one on the back end.
And he did sit some games last year. He did. And there weren't a lot of games, but he sat some. I mean, the Lightning were without Moser for whatever it was, 2 months. So they kind of had all hands on deck. But look, if Coop and the rest of the coaches decide that if Crozier is able to return on Thursday, they do have options. We've talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
They could move Moser to the left side and go with 3 righties and 3 lefties.
It's a good point.
With sitting Lilleberg, if they decide to do that.
Scott says this is supposedly a top-tier team. The turnovers and shot inequity are alarming.
Yeah, we kind of touched on that. So the turnovers, as you often say, Greg, not all turnovers are created equal, and you have a lot of turnovers in games.
Yes.
So some turnovers have led directly to scoring chances, like a bad pinch, for example, in the Boston game. It actually wasn't a turnover, but that was essentially a turnover because the Lightning made a decision that opened the door for the other team to get a scoring chance. But if you are not executing up the ice, even if it's not a, per se, costly turnover, it is taking you off the attack. And I think that is feeding into some of this shot disparity, as well as a willingness to shoot. The Lightning definitely have passed up opportunities to shoot, but there have been stretches in game where they simply haven't had an opportunity to shoot because they've been chasing.
Yeah.
Or the other team is breaking up the play before they have an opportunity to shoot in the offensive zone. Or it's a one and done. They get it in, the puck's coming right back out.
It doesn't help that I think your best offensive player has been he hasn't found his rhythm yet. Mm-hmm. And a guy like Brandon Hagel typically is making an impact every game. Offensively, for sure. They just haven't found it yet. Yeah. You may see spurts here and there, but just you're not used to seeing those guys not have any points or have one assist. I anticipate that's going to change. Hopefully it changes on Thursday, partner. But this is kind of the process here. Craig says, I'm concerned about sustained pressure and the inability to get shots between the dots.
Yes. That was to
point,
me part of what I said when the glass was half empty. The Detroit game, the third period, was the notable exception, but you're not going to get periods like that often.
Right.
That was a confluence of them being down. They really pressed the other team. I'm sorry. The other team was flat. The other team didn't handle what the Lightning were throwing at them well. Therefore, they were able to generate a whole bunch of scoring chances.
FKA 322 says, what is it going to take for them to sustain offensive pressure for 3 whole periods? Their offense looks so lazy and uninspired.
Well, that's the 60-minute game part, Greg. You're not going to be able to sustain pressure for 3 whole periods, but they could have more sustained pressure than what we've seen. And it's about some of it's execution. I think some of it is mano a mano, winning puck battles, which the Lightning did a lot of, again, in that third period against Detroit. Right. They won a lot of puck battles. I thought they won a fair number of puck battles in the third period against Columbus. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't have had the 15 shots and the 30-plus shot attempts. But the earlier question about getting to the areas between the dots, that was harder to do.
Yeah.
Gensel had the one where he had room to walk into the middle, and Greaves made a good save on him, and then Gensel was slew-footed, which he was very unhappy about that there was no penalty called. But
he should have been. I mean, that was
the save was made, and he was past the puck at that point.
Yeah.
So
I'm the oatmeal guy. Says coming into the season, Cooch just emphasizing consistency. We can't pop off for one period, then coast to a win. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying in terms of consistency. Yeah. It's not like they don't want the consistency. Other teams having a say in this. We get that. They're just, for whatever reason, they're out of sync. I don't know how else to say it to you because I don't want to get way technical because I think that loses the audience. They're just not in sync. Their top players aren't in sync yet. You go as far as your top players in many instances at every sport. And right now, the inconsistencies there are prominent. Do we think that's going to last? No. There's too much of a track record there. It's just, again, the beginning of the year is more eye-opening because everything is fresh. And we're not used to seeing this. Do we think it's going to get righted? Yeah. John Cooper's been mixing lines. Look, for every line that's not working, we saw one, the Bjorkstrand line, that looks like it was. So maybe maybe he sticks. Maybe he sticks with that. You know, I don't know if you want to break up too much or too long the Cirelli-Hagel dynamic, but maybe you do. He's got to figure that out, and typically Coop does. But that's kind of where we are. David says puck possession in all three zones is a problem, maybe because of illness, but the team in general looks slow to puck, slow to react, maybe too much east-west and not enough north-south.
That, I think, feeds into the not being in sync.
Yeah.
And why has the Gord line looked more in sync? Like they are connecting the dots in the offensive zone and through the neutral zone. So I'm just bringing them up as a contrast because I think they have been noticeably more dynamic than the other lines the Lightning have thrown out there, with some exceptions. I mean, the Gensel, Cirelli, Gonsalves line, which was a line in the first period in Boston, did quite well in that first period. But if we're just looking at the road trip as a whole, at the very end, Holmberg was moved off that line because Coop was searching for something. But I think that was more about the other lines than the Gord line. Why has that line been more noticeable? They are more in sync, and they win their puck battles. Pontus Holmberg wins puck battles. Remember all the talk we heard in preseason? We didn't see Holmberg until the final game, but people were like, you know, the Lightning needed to add an enforcer, which, you know, they added Curtis Douglas. But people were like, why did they didn't specifically mention Holmberg, but they were like, you know, why didn't Julian go out and get a tough guy? And I'm like, Holmberg is not a tough guy. Like, he's mixed it up on occasion. But you wouldn't call him an enforcer or a fighter, I don't think.
No.
But what I said was, I think Lightning fans are really going to like the way this guy plays. I really like the way he plays. And he's chipped in some points, too. But it's more about he plays in a straight line. He's a smart player. He plays hard. And he has consistently won his puck battles this year. Unfortunately, the other lines for the Lightning have not been as in sync as the Gord line. And some of that is winning your one-on-one battles. Some of that is, you know, executing up the ice and making sure you're putting a puck on your teammate's stick. And it's being in sync. It's like Ryan Malone was talking about when he did the opener with me. You know, Ottawa's making smart dump-ins. Like, they were putting pucks in areas where support, that's the word, right? Like, you're putting pucks in areas where your teammate can get it. And if your teammate is in trouble, there's somebody there providing support. That's how you string together longer offensive zone shifts. It just hasn't happened enough for the Lightning so far this year. And when they've had some cycle shifts, and this does include the Gord line, too often they haven't gotten the puck to the middle of the ice for an opportunity to shoot from a dangerous area.
Snowman says everything has been a problem. Kyle says that they look better shorthanded somehow.
Well, their shorthanded kill percentage is very high, and you do tend to play with more urgency when you're shorthanded because you're shorthanded, right? But they've also leaned on their goalies to make saves while shorthanded. How about the saves Johansson made at the end of the second period? That was while the Lightning were on the penalty kill because Hagel had it in the neutral zone, lost it, turned into a 3-on-1, point-blank saves on Jenner and Fantilli to keep that game 2-2.
Joe says, it seems like with all of the new pieces in play on the team, everyone needs to have time to get to gel together. Mixing in other new players at this time will only prolong the process.
So I actually disagree a little bit, Joe. I mean, who's new on this team? Yeah,
Unless
the fourth line looks a little different, and Holmberg. I mean, the top six is basically the same, isn't it?
Unless it's in reference to what I suggested, bringing a couple of guys up to Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
Size. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Well, I think he's saying don't do that, but he's also saying with the new guys we have. I mean, there are some new players, but I mean, honestly, like Holmberg has looked really good. Max Crozier is new to the Lightning in terms of, we'll call it being a regular until he got hurt. He looked really good. Mm-hmm. I think what you pointed out, Greg, was it's the regulars, the guys at the top of the heap for the Lightning, the ones that have been difference makers, they haven't really gotten in sync yet. And all those players are not new to the Lightning.
Yeah. Joe says, does anyone on the Lightning coaching staff give Douglas fighting lessons to be a better fighter on the ice? Or does he just have to figure it out on his own?
Well, I think he's done some figuring out on his own.
Yeah.
Maybe just in general. So what Malone said to me when he saw him, he's like, this guy's such an advantage because of his wingspan. And Malone actually demonstrated gently, but, he kind of took me by the shirt.
The collar there.
And pushed me away. Yeah. He's like, if I hold you out here, your arms are you can't reach me, right? We saw that with the Olivier fight. Like, Olivier ended up kind of tackling him at the end and maybe got in one shot at the end. But for a lot of that fight, Douglas was just holding Olivier with his wingspan. And Olivier's trying to throw punches, and it's like,
I can't do it.
You're a couple of inches short, right? Whereas Douglas has the wingspan with the
You got to get in tight. You got to get in tight.
You got to get in tight on him. So I think there's no question Douglas has a lot of experience fighting and uses, no pun intended, his strengths to his advantage. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's an actual coach who teaches fighting. You hear that guys sometimes, you talked about Malone himself taking boxing lessons when he was early.
A lot of those
in his
guys
career.
do now. I shouldn't say a lot. Some
or
guys
they go to other tough guys. I think Maroon, would work with some younger players sometimes on fighting techniques.
Timothy says if Douglas is only on the team to fight, he needs to go down. Not impressed with his game.
So I actually think what they've asked Curtis Douglas to do other than fight, he has done fine.
Yeah.
Now fans may be like, he needs to do more than fine. Like, he uses his long reach with his stick very effectively. Yeah. Like, he understands that he doesn't have that quick, explosive first step. He can't. Like, he's 6'9", right? Even Chara at 6'9" didn't have necessarily a quick, explosive first step, but Chara was turned into a very good skater.
Hall of Famer.
For a man that big. Yes, absolutely. And then he had all the other assets. So I think if you watch Douglas's shifts, he's done his job. He just hasn't had a lot of ice time.
What are your expectations?
I mean, they had a sequence in Detroit. He didn't get the chances. It was Chafee and Finley, but he was involved. And they almost scored. It might have been their best
what are your
chance
expectations?
Before Moser scored.
I would ask that fan and anybody who maybe suggests Douglas needs to be sent down, which is fine. That's your opinion. But what are your expectations? Mine are don't get scored on, and clearly you are somebody who is going to be out there to deter other people from messing with your
taking
guys.
Liberties, yeah.
I'm not big on the stage fight. I think that's kind of what happened in Columbus a little bit. I mean, they were talking before the game, and then that happens. Does that change the complexion of a game? I'm more of, if you're going to throw down, it's got like in the heat of the moment. I think Phil is probably the same way. Because
Phil
I don't
hates the stage fights.
Yeah, because I don't think the stage fight is going to prevent a player from the other team at taking a run at one of your guys. I just don't. I think what we saw on Saturday was, hey, we're two guys who can fight. Let's dance.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. So
Now, look, if Douglas turns into an Olivier, and Olivier has been in the NHL for a number of years. I mean, I remember seeing him in the 2021 season in Nashville regularly. And I think he had a cup of coffee in the NHL prior to that. I think did he have over 20 goals last year? I mean, he had a very good offensive year in addition to having over 100 penalty minutes. Those guys are certainly more rare. Speaking of guys who can score and who are tough, did you see this Tom Wilson hit on Hedl yesterday?
I didn't see it.
Hedl has had a lot of concussion problems. We know that. He's finally well enough to play. He's in Vancouver. Vancouver acquired him from the Rangers in the JT Miller deal. So he's skating up the ice. He passes to the right, is watching the puck, and Wilson comes on his blind side and just absolutely blows him up. So here's the thing. It was a check to the chest, so it was not a hit to the head. So the officials reviewed it and called no penalty. So the reason that they called no penalty was they did not determine, or they determined that it was not late enough. It was right on the cusp of being late, but it was not late enough for them to feel that it was interference. Had it been interference, he would have gotten like Hagel got in the playoffs last year. He would have gotten a major in a game. I am certain of it. But it's close. Like, it's definitely not right after he let go of the puck, but it isn't like a beat or two either.
I just saw it.
Yeah. So you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like that. So the Hagel hit on Barkov never touched the puck. So that was clearly interference. This one, the guy delivers the puck. And then how much time passes before the hit is delivered? And the officials reviewed it, and based on the review, they decided that it was still within the range of you are eligible to be hit. And he whaled him. And I'm very worried for Hedl because it was a extremely bad injury.
Yeah, Dave, that's a bad hit. I'm looking at this now. That's a bad hit.
You think it was late?
Not only is it a bad hit, too, I guess it doesn't matter. But, I mean, he took basically 3 strides. The puck was off his stick, and then Wilson blew him up. The thing that's disappointing is he's got concussion problems.
Yeah.
And you took a run at a guy.
You don't like the lack of respect.
I mean, and look, you could say, well, Greg, he shouldn't be on the ice, and this, Tom. Okay, but if you were under the assumption that's a bad hit, which I was, there is a lack of respect anyway.
Yeah, the Vancouver. I heard the Vancouver feed. The announcers, John Shorthouse said immediately that's a bad hit.
Yeah, I'm looking at this for the first time.
The officials looked at it and they did not feel it was late. And if it's not late, it was a hit to the chest, and it is a player. Like the other side of the coin is Hedl is playing. If you're in a game, you're eligible to be hit. And it's not up to the other team to say, I know you've had concussion problems. I'm not going to hit you. Now, Wilson whaled him. There's no question, but he didn't hit him in the head.
No, and that part I will say, like, he doesn't leave his feet.
Yeah.
He kind of got tighter. I get that. I think it's did you need to blow up a guy?
Yeah.
Like that. That's always the question. And I guess,
right.
The old timers may say, hey, that's part of the game. Fine.
Yeah.
But we've also
seen they're going to play again in Vancouver, and this is
and who does Vancouver have? Well, who does Vancouver have to address that? Because immediately I like to see who goes after Wilson.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Carrier, went after him, but that's it. Like, I'm looking at, I mean, does Vancouver
maybe they have
a
someone
tough
in
guy?
the minors.
They bring him up. I mean, is that going to... and then
Vancouver Canucks have acquired Scott Savarin. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, really, because we have said this, and we can end the show this way, not to end with a Tom Wilson, but Tom Wilson is uniquely qualified to make an impact on a game just as much as Nikita Kucherov.
He did against the Lightning. He had a goal and 2 assists.
I mean, this guy is just a wrecking ball, and he can play. There's really nobody like that in the NHL who does it at his level. I mean, maybe. I mean, can you think off the top of your head? Is there anybody there that would challenge what he can do? I mean, he's a great fighter as well.
Yeah. He doesn't fight as much. I mean, his
penalty
units have gone down. Yeah. I mean, he's probably at the point where he's like, I want to be on the ice.
Yeah.
But he does lay big checks. He hammered Moser in the game against the Lightning.
And, Moser got right back up to his credit.
Yeah.
Man, that was a bad hit. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what
Anyway,
people think.
for my sake, I hope Hedl is okay.
Yeah,
I would be
jeez.
very, very surprised if there was any supplemental discipline. We probably would have heard about it at this point because they reviewed it and they called no penalty on the ice. And people were like, how is that possible? Well, because the penalty would be interference, and you are allowed a beat or whatever it is to hit a player after he delivers a pass. So, unfortunately, Hedl didn't see him coming and took a very, very hard blow. But
yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
yeah,
Partner, we'll continue the discussion tomorrow. We didn't get to all of the questions, so keep those questions piled.
yeah. Well, there was a
at
lot to
Bolts
talk
Radio.
about
Lots
over the
to talk
weekend.
about, for sure. We're efforting to get some guests as well. Are we taping tomorrow? I think we are.
We are pre-taping tomorrow.
I just want to make sure our audience knows, so get those questions in now.
Our plan is to be live the rest of the week, though.
That is correct.
So, subject to change, as they say.
Subject to change. Partner, great job by you as always, and we'll do it again tomorrow
Talk to you tomorrow.
for the show. Thanks to Steve Versnick. Thanks to Jared Johnston. Thanks to you for listening. We always appreciate you guys. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.
Follow Lightning Radio on social media at Bolts Radio. And don't forget to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode of Into the Blue.